Difficulty synthesizing. Identify common themes to simplify connections. Overcoming difficulty in synthesizing literature. Identifying common themes to simplify connections. Writing, Chapter 2. Review of related literature. In a thesis requires more than just summarizing sources. A common challenge researchers face is difficulty in synthesizing information, integrating multiple studies into a cohesive and meaningful discussion. Instead of presenting isolated summaries and effective literature, review should identify common themes, compare findings, and highlight relationships among studies. This synthesis simplifies connections and ensures the literature review remains focused, structured, and insightful. This section explores how to identify common themes, categorize studies, and synthesize information effectively to overcome the challenge of integrating multiple sources in Chapter 2.1. Understanding the challenge of synthesizing. Literature synthesis in literature review writing means connecting studies by identifying trends, agreements, contradictions, and gaps rather than merely summarizing individual research findings. Many students struggle with this process due to the following reasons. Overwhelming amount of information. Reviewing dozens of studies can make it difficult to see connections. Lack of thematic organization. Without clear themes, research appears fragmented. Tendency to summarize. Instead of compare, listing separate studies without linking their findings results in a disjointed discussion. Failure to identify patterns. Studies that share similar insights may not be grouped together effectively. Unclear research focus. Without a strong central argument, synthesis may become unclear. To overcome these challenges, researchers need to focus on thematic organization and strategic analysis rather than just summarization. Quote, identifying common themes for better synthesis. To simplify connections among various studies, researchers should identify common themes and categorize literature accordingly. This ensures a logical flow and makes it easier to compare findings. A. How to identify common themes in the literature review research questions. Revisit the thesis problem statement to ensure the identified themes directly contribute to answering key research questions. Look for recurring topics. Identify patterns in findings, such as common variables, methodologies, or conclusions. Classify studies based on concepts. Instead of summarizing sources chronologically, group them by relevant topics or key arguments. Note conflicting findings. Identifying studies that contradict each other can provide insight into research gaps and unresolved issues. Consider theoretical frameworks. Use established theories to help categorize studies based on conceptual similarities. B. Organizing literature into thematic categories. After identifying common themes, studies should be categorized based on their relevance to specific topics. Example: a study on social media and student performance. Instead of listing studies individually, they can be grouped into themes such as social media and academic engagement. Smith, 2018, found that social media enhances collaborative learning. Jones, 2019, reported that students in online study groups had higher retention rates. Negative effects of social media on Focusly, 2020, argued that excessive screen time reduced concentration levels. Brown, 2021, found a correlation between social media addiction and lower test scores. Balanced approaches to social media, Yus Patel, 2022, suggested that regulated social media use can improve study efficiency. Garcia, 2023, highlighted the role of educational platforms in promoting productive engagement. By grouping studies into themes, connections between findings become clearer, making it easier to synthesize information. Effective strategies for synthesizing studies. Once literature is categorized into common themes, the next step is to synthesize the information rather than merely summarizing it. A. Compare and contrast. Studies, instead of discussing each study separately, analyze how they relate to one another. Poor example: isolated summaries. Smith, 2018, found that students using social media study groups performed better. Jones, 2019, also found positive effects of social media on student retention. Lee, 2020, reported that excessive social media use leads to lower concentration. Improved example, synthesis with comparison. While Smith, 2018, and Jones, 2019, emphasize the educational benefits of social media, Lee, 2020, highlights its potential drawbacks, suggesting that its impact depends on how it is used. This approach synthesizes findings rather than treating them as separate pieces of information. B. Highlight research gaps and unresolved issues. After synthesizing studies, it is important to identify gaps in the literature, areas where research is lacking or findings are contradictory. 4. Conclusion. Achieving a well-synthesized literature review. Difficulty in synthesizing literature is a common challenge, but identifying common themes helps simplify connections between studies. Instead of summarizing research individually, an effective literature review should identify recurring topics to group studies based on shared themes rather than listing them separately. Compare and contrast findings to highlight relationships, agreements, and contradictions. Use thematic organization to ensure the literature review has a clear structure. Highlight research gaps to show where further study is needed. Use transitional phrases to improve flow and readability. By following these strategies, researchers can synthesize studies effectively, creating a literature review that is clear, structured, and insightful. If you like this kind of content, click subscribe to be updated on the next tips on how to write Chapter 2. Thank you.